Hello, I'm Dominic Walker, JMW's Inside Man. So there's been reports this week of an MP watching inappropriate content in the chamber of the House of Commons. Now, this sort of thing won't be exclusive just to the House of Commons. It will probably apply to other workplaces as well. Zainab Hussein is a solicitor within JMW's Employment Law Department. So Zainab, what would an employer do if they found an employee watching or downloading inappropriate content?
I think the first thing the employer has to think about is how has it come to their attention? How has it been discovered? Has it been a tip off from another employee? Or have they had a report from IT, for example, to say that this person's been watching inappropriate content during work time or out of work time? However the case may be. The first step is to carry out an investigation. So you have to have a sure belief that that person has done what somebody has either said they've done. You have to have some firm information there to make sure you can go forward and go through with a process. As we've kind of said before on these videos, if you've got an allegation and there's no substance, you're going to expose yourself to risk as a business if you then choose to dismiss somebody as a result of that. So that would be the first step, I would say. And it may also be appropriate during this time to suspend the individual in the circumstances whilst you carry out the investigation. Now, you have to be careful when you actually exercise suspension, but clearly in this circumstance, it might be appropriate to do whilst you're carrying out your investigations and speaking to other people about the conduct.
So in a workplace, would it be a sackable offence? Would there be a dismissal?
I think ostensibly, yes, just because of the type, and especially in this circumstance, because of the type of the content that's being viewed, it is capable of something that could be considered gross misconduct, especially under the lens of a tribunal. Again, as I've said before, you need to be careful how you actually manage the process. First of all, you have to be sure that they've actually done it and carry out your investigation to do that. And then the second part of that is you have to then follow a proper process, because although, it's not going to be viewed favourably if somebody has watched that kind of content during work time, you have to carry out your process if they've got the protection under the unfair dismissal legislation to make sure that they have a reasonable chance to represent themselves. If they don't, then that would be capable of being actually something that could be considered unfair dismissal. Obviously, again, as I've said, it's not going to be viewed very favourably under the lens of a tribunal. They'll say, they can make reductions to any award that's given because of the type of conduct. But you have to be sure that they have committed that conduct. So it's going to tip on a case-by-case basis, as we always normally say. But, I think it's one of those where, ancillary to that, somebody might actually not choose to bring a claim because they're airing their dirty laundry in public and they have viewed that kind of content. They might feel embarrassed about that. So it depends as a business how amenable you are to risk and how you want to carry on the process. I think wider to that point, and I've touched upon it before, is how has it been discovered? If somebody else, another employee, has caught them viewing that content, then that's capable of amounting to sexual harassment. So there's other risks there that the business has to manage. And I think sometimes you think of sexual harassment as unwanted touching or unwanted verbal comments. But actually, if it's capable of creating a hostile environment, then that is harassment in the legal sense as well. And I think as a business, you have to be careful of how we're going to manage this, because do we want to be seen as tolerating that kind of behaviour? There could be a ripple effect amongst other employees where they could say, well, how is that treated as acceptable? So really, your decision in respect to the person viewing the content has a lot of wider ramifications to failing to deal with it. Won't be viewed as positive probably by your workforce, and you are liable as an employer vicariously for any actions of your employees. So I think you have to be careful how you manage it. I think the interesting thing with this case is quite a senior individual. And obviously in the private sector, if it's quite a senior individual that's fairly high up, do you want that to become a public, process if they do bring a tribunal claim? Maybe it's worth actually having a separate confidential conversation with that person and try and have a protected conversation to exit them from the business before you have to incite any process. Obviously, you might want to keep any settlement sums very low because of the conduct, but that might be a way to achieve a resolution that keeps things confidential and private. I think if you're then relying on that kind of process, you want to have a protected conversation. you don't want to hamstring yourself. You want to make sure you're carrying on a formal process in the background, so you have something to fall back on if that doesn't work. But I think that's another alternative solution to this kind of problem too.
And you've mentioned a few solutions there. How more generally can you and the JMW employment team help employers who may face a similar situation?
So as I've mentioned before, there's a lot of considerations that you have to take into account when dealing with something sensitive like this. So we can help manage risk in that process and advise on, not only the process that you've got at hand with that specific person, but the wider process as well, and how you manage that. So we can definitely help with that.
Zainab, thank you very much for your insight. If you'd like to speak to Zainab, you can email insideman@jmw.co.uk or call 0161 82 81 999. I'm Dominic Walker, JMW's Inside Man.